Our first speaker is Dr. Tal Nitsan and Sophie Davis will on gender conflict resolution. And I'll say this in a moment, but you're the first one. And so the Sophie Davis Forum on Gender Conflict Resolution, and this is part of the Davis Institute for International Relations at Hebrew University. And Tal is an anthropologist and an activist, a feminist scholar who critically examines the intersections of gender, violence, and social change. Her talk will focus on gender perspectives of environmental conflict.
Thank you for inviting me. As I said earlier, it's a very busy time of the year, but it's a joy to be invited for a talk and not have to worry about so environmental migration is not determined by people's exposure to environmental and climate risk and their capacity to anticipate, cope with, adapt, and recover from consequences of natural hazards and environmental risks. All of these dimensions are gendered. And we have to discuss them as such in order to have a more comprehensive understanding and to be able to create comprehensive policy as well. It's not So what I'd love to do today is basically look a little bit at the concept of or the category of gender, and then look how this category impacts all of the dimensions. Is it better? Can you hear me? Okay. So basically, when we talk about gender, we talk about social category, which is also a political category, and also an animal category. When I talk about social category, I talk about social constructive and expectation based on gender relations. For instance, if you look at education, we have different expectations of who would go and study sciences and who would go and study arts. We talk about the differences on the emotional level, who can be hysterical and who is allowed to be angry. We talk about different occupations. We talk about differences in labor division in the family and the community. Oftentimes we see the difference between earning and sharing. We see differences in the expectation in how people perform. They're present in the public, the way that we dress, cut our hair, wear or not makeup, and so on. And when we talk about social category, we also bear in mind that there are changes, like these categories change between societies and communities, locations, and history, and we constantly see more rigid or more loose societies and always in terms of the When we talk about gender in the political category, we see that gender norms and expectations are first naturalized, even though we accept they are social constructed. And that man-related norms and expectations are usually more valued in greater access to resources, natural resources, social and political. The last category, the dependent category, is the one that acknowledges that there are intersections between gender and different nationalities, ethnicity, ability, race, sexuality, and so on, that have tremendous impact on the way that we are in society, and again, our access to resources. So when we talk about gender and climate change, we When you look at all of these dimensions, through various access. First, we look at the access to use, control of the natural resources, and the world that developing world, women, about 80 to 80 or even more percentage of women are doing farming and depending on natural resources. As natural resources aggregate, they become greater risk of poverty and so on. Exploitation and others. When we talk about women in such situations, the degradation of the natural resources make it harder for them to get food, to fetch water, to make not only enhance their poverty, but also increase their exposure to dangerous situations if they have to walk great distances to get water. Sometimes they're exposed to various uses in order to maintain access to water, food, and of course, in more moderate way, when you spend half your day going to the water, your ability to go to school is reduced. So they also get less access to schooling and education. Similarly, it's important to notice what happens to control the impacts and control of economic access. So when you have limited access to economic resources, we should part of how women are more prone to poverty in relation to the occupations that they are channeled to in relation to where they are in the social structure and what it is expected from them. Even when they do go and in the labor to earn money, the jobs that they can get are often restricted in the capacity of earning. So we constantly see in all the reports that women are generally in the lower earning table, even that there are many women who earn more money than some men. Okay, it's not the economy is not open, but we do see that generally women are more supported. Situation of poverty also situates women in workplaces in the city, if the risk of the river will go up, so impoverished population will be in that area, and the houses will be more prone to fall apart and with some the floods and there is another intensify the winter situation. When we talk about these about gender dimension of social life, one of the things that is really important is thinking about the ability to make decisions. And in order to make decisions, we need some knowledge. We need access to knowledge. In this sense, if we cannot read in English, if we don't have access to computers and the internet, our ability to understand that we are is smaller. If we don't have access to funds, our ability to leave the place that we leave and go somewhere else is relatively smaller. Especially if we have some property, then there's the fear of leaving behind and lose it. People stay behind even since that disaster is coming on them. Another thing that is really important is household and community expectations. We have different expectations and neighborhood families. Has to do with culture and religious expression, sometimes vulnerability, sometimes expectations that men would take leading positions and women could wait for orders and what to do and how to do. Men are often expected to be, the breadwinners, and women to take caring positions. Caring positions are not only for themselves, of course, and they have children, family members. That means that they are also restricted to some of them are restricted to some cultural expectations related to religious behaviors, the religious clothing. That means that sometimes women fear to leave and go to shelters because they're worried that in those shelters they will not have proper separation for men, and the chastity would be harmed, harm. Labor, the ability to have access to education is lowered, and therefore, even when we have stateside education, they're not necessarily be able to get there or be able to spread their knowledge in a way that can be helpful in this event. And the outcome is that without hearing their voices, their experiences are more than I want to talk about three modes or three levels of environmental migration. The first one is gradual migration. And this is the planned migration. Sorry, not gradual migration. Planned migration will be willful migration, and in comparison to survival forced migration. On this level, you can definitely see the importance of the ability to make decisions, the importance of having access to information and access to other modes of mobility, like cars, like bank accounts. Because when we do have the information about what is coming, and when we can read both what's happening on the ground and what is to come, it is definitely better and makes better migration experience if we plan ahead of time and we choose to leave. And apparently it's really harder for women to be part of this willing to migration, and oftentimes they find themselves at the edge of more survival migration. So it really makes a huge difference if it's a willing goal for survival migration, and there are certain requirements to be choosing this one like the other. The other one that is really important for us is we're talking about internal or external migration. When we talk about an internal migration, meaning going from a village to the city, there's often a greater level of accountability in the part of the city or the state, offering some levels of support. And on the other hand, there's similar culture. So when we find ourselves migrating to the state, not only that the accountability is lower, which is very important, I'll get to that later. Also, there is a need to accommodate for the different steps of migration, is whether household or we're talking about partial gender-based migration.
So as I said before, in order to engage in a willful and planned migration, a key dimension is access to funds. Also, access to education, professional skills. If we have a profession that we can work in a different country, it would make it easier for us to migrate. If we have skills, if we know how to drive, if we know English, all of these will make it way better for migration experience. As I said earlier, sometimes women are not expected to have such skills, to have a formal education. Therefore, if they get to the position of migration, their ability to adapt is lower, but also in the decision-making stage, it'll be harder for them to make this decision because they can anticipate the hardship in doing so. If we talk about cultural expectations, we can see that there are cultural expectations that men would be breadwinners, and this is why when we see the natural resource degradation, oftentimes men choose to leave villages and go to the city, earn wages to support their families. At the same time, we have expectations that women will stay at home, maintain their families, and maintain if they have any agricultural fields and other livestocks, so they will maintaining those assets for the whole family. Cultural expectations of men are also to hold a leadership position, and for women to stay and wait for their guidance. It's also very impactful in the situation where men leave and women stay behind, because they are left without those level of guidance. And in a situation of intensified degradation of resources or a real intense crisis, women would not necessarily be able to make a decision of fleeing, not because they're lack of this mental ability, because they're trained to wait for guidance. And if guidance is not there, no one will be there to take this initiative. Oftentimes, they will also be left behind in a harshness situation, which means that they have to double, triple, and quarter their efforts, their daily efforts, because they have to care for the family, they have to maintain labor for farming, and they have to take over community leadership, which they never did before, and oftentimes also manage whatever environmental risks are coming upon them. So this situation creates exhaustion, and oftentimes makes them even less able to deal with their tripled or quartered share. Oftentimes when women stay behind, they experience a lack of support from states or municipalities, as they're not recognized as heads of households. So because they are women-head households, they would not get whatever support the house received earlier, which makes their situation even harsher, greater poverty, and greater struggles. On the other hand, the fact that men leave communities and suddenly all of these positions of power and managing communities are open to women and give them, for the first time, the ability to be part of leadership positions and managing their own communities. How are we doing with time?
2 more minutes.
Okay. If we talk about migration of men or migration of the whole community, when we look at the actual procedures of migration, we see that in the new place, it really depends if the country, the accepting country is welcoming or find them as a threat. Oftentimes we see different approaches to men and women. Men can be seen as a dangerous factor. Sometimes men specific or special education or community support. So families that migrate, again, will have to deal with intensified care work because there would be no schooling or no other welfare support for their family. On the other hand, sometimes states or international community will support women separately and offer them various of programming and networking that will aim to empower them or give them various support to help them maintain their livelihood and assimilate into the new culture. So to sum up, I'd say that migration in general is a gendered process, and the environmental migration makes all of these gendered dimension even more pronounced because of the dangers that they bring with them. I didn't get into all the capacities of abuse and trafficking and other levels of painful engagement with receiving societies, but I think the majority of us are familiar with them. And because we tend not to take into account these dimensions, policymakers create policies for environmental migration that do not take into consideration all of these levels and do not create proper and long-lasting policies.
Thank you very much.